it was a huge wake-up call. Changed the trajectory of kids' lives.
Accountability, there's trust, there's lack of commitment, fear of conflict. Find a coach that you trust. You're going to have some people mad at me.
What's up, everybody? I'm Sean Kalani, and I want to introduce you to my podcast called Timeout With Sko. This podcast is going to take a look at meaningful topics within basketball. We'll have guests every episode, and I'm excited to share stories and to share experiences with you guys. Today we have Coach Cav, who is currently the coach of St. Monica High School boys basketball. Coach Cav is a former Division I basketball player. He's played at St. Mary's, and on top of his experience as a player, he has also been a head coach at numerous different places. St. Anthony, he's been an assistant coach at Cal State Long Beach, and as well as St. Monica. And I want to just first say thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Coach. I appreciate it.
So, when we first started talking and we first met, I think one of the things that we easily connected on was how impactful it is with just being a coach in general. And I wanted to talk to you about that and just your experiences as a coach, and talk to me about your impact. And, I think a lot of times for us as coaches, we want to have impact on others, but I think the thing that is really important is how we are actually impacted by players. So I would love for you to just share more about that and your experiences.
For me, the best part about what I do is the relationships that I'm fortunate enough to build with my players. I've coached at a lot of different levels: Division I, community college, D2, high school, and for the most part, every place I've been, I have relationships with multiple players at each school. And so seeing those kids from my early part of my career now be fathers and have careers, and they have kids, and so I see them coaching their sons, and it's amazing because so much of the connection is off the court. With our programs, we try to make sure we prioritize and be very intentional with a lot of activities off the court, be it Bible study, team bonding, meals, movies, miniature golf. This year we had a mental health person come and speak with our guys, and so trying to make sure that they develop emotionally, spiritually, mentally is important for me. And so through those things, we're able to build really strong relationships. And so I'm grateful for that. So they are impactful for me.
Is there one experience specifically that stands out to you in regards to working with another player and just realizing, wow, this is actually really meaningful to me?
I coached at Compton College from 2004 to 2007, and I coached a kid named Jamal. He wasn't a kid, it was college, so he was an adult, but he was a young man who had stepped away from the game. He had a kid and, was being a father, and we connected, and he ended up coming to play for me. And we had a great season, won our conference, the South Coast Conference, and after that, he played at Dominguez Hills, and so he played for me also in the Drew League, and so we formed a really strong bond. And when I got the job at St. Anthony, he became part of our coaching staff. And so being able to work with someone that I coached, and now he's a colleague, and one of my most enjoyable moments as a coach is, he got his own team at Garfield High School, and they won a city championship. And so I was there the night he won, and just being a part of that and watching his growth and seeing him as a young man to now being a head coach. That's one of the most proud moments that I've had as a coach.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it touches on something else that I was thinking about that we've spoken about before, this concept of relationship before rules.
Right.
And I think in this generation that we're in, this is a constant topic that's being discussed, right? How do we coach kids of this generation? Because, things are changing. And so as coaches, it's important for us to also adapt and grow within that change. And so I want you to talk more about, with the teams that you've been a part of, whether it's, assistant coaching or head coaching, how have you installed that sort of philosophy of relationships before rules, and why do you think that's so valuable?
Well, I believe that rules are important. You have to have structure, you have to have discipline, you have to have accountability. Now, if you want the players to respond to it, there has to be a connection. So like I'm older, so I can't just be the old ball guy barking rules and giving orders about what's okay and what's not. Because we've spent time, we've talked about their family and their grades and their faith and what they believe in and who's sick and whatever's going on in their life. When I coach them hard or push them, it's not just someone who's their coach, it's someone who cares about them. So in most cases, not all, but in most cases, they know it's coming from a good place, and it's not me just being a jerk. It's we have high expectations. There's a standard for the program. In order for us to be successful, we all have to meet it. So we're dealing with kids and young men, and so it's not if they fail, it's when. And so we've talked about prior to, the falling short or the failure, what the expectation is. So and I tell people all the time, kids might be a little crazy, but they're not stupid. So when they're late or talking back or fighting with their teammates, they know it's wrong, but they're imperfect, just like I am. And so being able to have those relationships in place, in most cases, will allow us to recover and rebound from the falling short or missing the mark. And so, being able to minimize those moments and not have them happen as frequently or as severe is important for us.
Did you have a coach that kind of implemented those things within his coaching with you that really stood out, that's helped you along the way, even as a player, or maybe just even from your experiences as a coach yourself?
Not as much because of my age. I grew up in a time where we didn't question the coach. We didn't question the teachers. We didn't question the coach. We just respected the position of authority. So, whether it was complaining about playing time or not being happy, we just did what the coach said, whether we liked it or not. Nowadays, and I learned this from Coach Alan Knipe at Long Beach State, we talked about it, and he's, maybe a little bit older than me. He was just saying that, he comes from that time also, but nowadays kids want to know why. And so instead of us being offended or, taking offense to it, being able to explain and share the experiences as to why it's important to do it. Now I can't always do it in the moment or in the heat of the moment in the game, but, that's when the trust comes in. But kids want to know why, they can't be late or why they should share the ball or why, arguing with your teammates is not okay or whatever it might be. Kids are going to question it. So those are things that we talk about. Them wanting to understand is important, and so having that connection helps bridge that gap. So I didn't have it as much, but being able to evolve to some degree to today's times is important.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, as a former player myself, the phrase that always stands out to me is, you'll always remember. You may not remember your teachers, but you'll always remember your coaches.
For better or worse.
Right. And I think that's been something for me as a coach that I've tried to kind of apply to my own coaching.
How's that going for you?
I think it's going well.
You think? Or is it going well?
No, it's going well. It's definitely going well. For me, I think coaching is such a sort of selfless and thankless job in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And I never picked up this job to receive a thank you, right? I picked up this job because I was genuinely able to share something that I loved with other people. Mm-hmm. For me, after college, I was injured, and so continuing my career was not something that was in the cards for me.
Wasn't an option.
Yeah, and so I had to figure out, how can I still be a part of this game? Right. And when I initially came into this game, I was so set on having this impact, right? This big impact. I wanted to change the trajectory of kids' lives. I wanted them to remember me as somebody that really helped them, that really cared for them.
That's dope.
And so it's really just inspiring to see every day your relationship with the kids and how meaningful you are to them. And I think it's important to note that. So
thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I think the other thing that, comes up for me when I'm thinking about, being a former player is that moment that changed for you in regards to, okay, it's time to hang it up, right? But, how did you know you wanted to coach? What did that, was there a specific moment? What changed for you?
I was always an underdog, and so coming out of high school, I think I had a Division III opportunity, and I would always work before practice, after practice. I stayed in the gym weekends, and when I was growing up, there was no trainer, there was no AAU, so for me, it was just I was really literally shooting the ball and chasing it down and going to get it myself. So I had a passion and a desire to be really good, and even though the scholarship opportunity that I wanted didn't come after high school, I decided to go to JUCO. And so JUCO, anyone who's been will tell you, is not for the weak. I was fortunate enough to be on a really good team. I did really well, then got a scholarship to go to St. Mary's. I wanted to go to the NBA like every other kid, or most kids. I did well, was MVP, all WCC, had a great time there. And then after that, I played in Mexico for 5 minutes, I tell people, and then reality hit. And thankfully, I got my degree. And my former coach at El Camino had a job, and he was like, hey, if you're not sure what you're going to do, why don't you come help me? So obviously, he was someone I was familiar with. I played with him. And what I came to the realization was I was a gym rat, but I couldn't play anymore. So I was still playing in the Drew League and all these leagues around the city, but that wasn't going to feed me. And I didn't come from an environment where I could go back home, so I had to figure it out on my own. And he was like, if you come coach with me, I'll work around your schedule and you can go to grad school. So I'm like, well, damn, if I can get a master's degree out of the deal and do something, to be able to give back, kind of like what you were talking about earlier, it's a win-win. And so what I found out is coaching, for me, is the next best thing to playing. So for someone who loves the game, fantasy basketball, I watch it, I work in it, and I would play it. I'm just a hooper. And so coaching was the next best thing to just dive into, and it also afforded me to be able to, as you mentioned earlier, impact other people. So, I tell people I've never really had to work a day in my life because this is all I've done.
Yeah, I think coaching is the best job in the world. I tell people.
It depends on the day.
The majority of days, though, you take the good with the bad
Right.
with any job.
For sure.
But there's something really
I wouldn't
special.
trade it.
Right. And there's something special, I think. We can coach in a lot of different ways in this industry, right? As a trainer, as a consultant, as a coach on a team.
Right.
Specifically for you, you're coaching on a team right now, and you're leading a team, essentially. And there's something, I think, that's really special about that and about the connections that you build when you're working with a group. Is that something that you could talk more about?
About building the connection?
Yeah, just how meaningful it is to be a part of a team and to be able to work collectively with a group towards a goal. Winning is something you've done everywhere you've gone.
Right.
So you've had success at it. So talk more about your formula.
Getting good players. That helps.
Yeah.
I can draw up whatever, and if I don't have anybody to execute it, that doesn't matter. I've been fortunate enough, for the most part, to have kids that trust me. Obviously it's not 100%, and it's not all the time, but by and large, the programs that I've been at every level have been getting the kids to buy in to what it is we're doing. So that blueprint of, we work really hard. At this particular school, we practice at 6 a.m., but there's a month, and I've done it at every level, at JUCO, at high school, where we have a month where we have significant conditioning, where we're running 5 miles and 17s and a lot of defensive stuff for the first month of the season. And so it sets a foundation and a tone of hard work, and thankfully the kids have bought into it, again, at every level. And I've been fortunate enough to have kids that buy in. Now, there's moments where kids are frustrated or don't like their role or playing time or whatever it might be. It happens on every team. And being the head coach, whenever somebody goes into the game, someone's going to go out. So someone's going to be not happy with me at some point. But that just comes with it. It's part of it. I can deal with it. But by and large, we've been successful because of the kids have trusted. Even when their peers don't or parents don't or whatever, the kids have been supportive. I try to be fair. Again, I'm not perfect, but, they do see the bigger picture, and when we do build relationships off the court as well. So that's helpful.
Yeah. One of the things I want to touch on that you had mentioned earlier was after your playing career, you continued going to school. Mm-hmm. And I believe you're you have 2 masters, one in counseling and one in kinesiology.
Yeah.
For somebody who's also gotten their master's, there's so much value, I think, to continued education.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about your experiences with your continued education, and what do you think the biggest skill is that you have attained from continuing your education that's helped you as a coach?
Persistence will be one. When I was coaching at El Camino College, I was teaching and like from 8 to 3. Then we'd have practice from 3 to 5, and then I was going to grad school from 6 to 10. So those two years that I did that, it was hell. It was hard. But I just kept reminding myself that it was temporary. The time's going to, and when I tell my players the same thing, the time's going to pass anyway. So you might as well bust your ass for the year or 2 years or whatever it is, and then your life is better once you complete the goal. And so because I was able to get a master's, I coached and taught at the community college level for 7 years, and then able to me to have a full-time job and teach. And, obviously I've taught at the high school level for another 9 or 10 years. And so, having my master's degree and continuing my education, it's obviously helped me financially in terms of being able to secure employment. But, when I went to St. Mary's, the only blacks there were the athletes. So it was a predominantly white environment. It's a very, very affluent school in an affluent area. And so being able to navigate that environment has helped me. And little did I know, as a coach and a teacher, with the exception of Compton College, every place I've taught, I've been the only black African-American full-time teacher. So being able to navigate, in a Caucasian environment has been a life skill for me. And so being able to have conversations and communicate and, interact and adapt for me, has been a life skill.
That's awesome. I actually didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Every place I've been at, I've been the only black full-time teacher.
How many times along your journey did you have to backstep? Did you come across adversity that really made you take a step back and think about what you're doing, think about how do I navigate this situation? And the reason that I ask you that is because I think right now we're living in a culture and an environment where a lot of times as parents, parents are trying to take away failure. They're trying to take away adversity from kids. And I think that there's something that's so valuable in the struggle. And I think it would be important for you to share some of the struggles and failures that you've had along the way. Why you think that they're so important to our journey?
It's funny you say that. In my performance psych and my theology class right now, we're doing a project called, Healing Our Wounds and How to Recover from Failure. So we're actually, they have to talk about what their definition of failure is, describing a public failure that they've had, how to recover from it. And so the work that they're submitting has been pretty cool. But to your point, failure is a part of life for all of us. And as a parent, and I've been guilty of it myself, we want to protect our kids. But also, I'm also aware that if I always protect my son and nothing ever happens to him, then that means nothing would ever happen to him, and that's not reality. So, seeing him get knocked on his ass from time to time and seeing what he does is important. So there have been times in my career where, I've lost or got a divorce or, struggled in my relationship with my kids just because, we're in 2 different homes or whatever it might be. It has been a part of my journey in figuring out how to recover from it because, I'm in a position now where people are constantly looking at me. And I've shared some of my failures with my teams in our open heart to heart. I try to be transparent. And for me, some people see transparency as a weakness. I think it's a strength. If I can show you who I am with my wounds and my flaws and say, take me here as I am, then for me, that's an opportunity for me to be vulnerable. And so most people would rather cover it or hide it or, pretend they don't exist. But failure is a part of life for all of us. So for me, it's not, if you get knocked down, it's what you're going to do when it happens. And so being able to be resilient, and actually it's a life skill that I learned growing up in my home. There was a lot of stuff that I had to deal with, and it prepared me early on for some of my, flaws or shortcomings.
And are there any things that you do, like within practice or within your team, that sets them up to sort of not fail but struggle?
Yeah, I always try to make practice harder than the games, and I tell them, if I don't kick your ass, then the other team will. So, having them struggle, or there's a level of accountability if we don't accomplish the goal. Most of the drills that we do in practice, there's a winner and a loser. And so the loser may have to run or do push-ups or whatever, figure eight or slide or, whatever it might be. But there's always a consequence for losing. And the winners understand. And we talk about it, what caused you guys to lose, or what did you not do that you should have, or what should you have done that you didn't. And so we talk about it. We watch film every day. So we look at, anybody who's played for me will tell you, look at the positives and negatives. Here's the things that we did well that we want to build on, and here are some things that we got to get better at. So I try to give them both. I tell them all the time, like the weatherman, I ain't going to tell you it's sunny if it's raining outside. So.
Yeah, I think winning and losing and adding that into, or using that as a variable within your practices, is something that is an easy measurable for kids in a lot of ways, where they can say and feel what it feels like to have been on the losing side and also the winning side.
Right.
And I think that that's really important in team settings. I think, one of the biggest things as a player development coach for me is when I'm in session or I'm running a session, I really want to make that session, comfortable so that people can fail. And I think when choosing a development coach, a lot of times kids want to choose a place where they feel comfortable making mistakes. And I think it's so hard to make mistakes in front of people, and to be able to do that in a team setting, but also to have, your brothers or your sisters there,
girlfriend,
right, that are cheering you on. I think that's so valuable and so important.
Yeah, there's a certain level of maturity that comes with failure. And the immature people will make excuses. The coach didn't like me, I was hurt, the ref was tripping, or whatever it might be. We do a lot of our drills early on in the year are one-on-one drills. And so either you get it done or you don't. So there's no excuse. So, the floor is slippery, the ball or whatever. The real players figure it out. They find a way, or they don't make excuses. Or when they fail, they're like, they don't like the feeling, so they make sure to be more prepared or play harder or whatever it is, so that it doesn't continue. The immature ones, it'll happen repeatedly, and they'll either tap out. And it's like life. We're going to get knocked on our ass. What are you going to do? You can sit up and complain and be a victim, or you can figure it out.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that you mentioned that was important for your players to possess skill-wise is resilience. Mm-hmm. Another thing that you also mentioned to me was integrity. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so valuable, but I think at times it's not mentioned enough. I think a lot of times when you hear a coach say, what do you look for in a player, to be a part of your team? They talk about hard work, right? They talk about discipline. They talk about consistency. But integrity, I think, is something that a lot of times is overlooked, because integrity is, when I turn my head, are you going to go as hard on that drill as when I'm watching? And I really love that you had mentioned that, and want you to talk more about how you apply that to your practices, and how do you determine that when you're watching a kid?
For me, and I tell people, I think I may have shared it with you, that my kids, whether it be my children or my players, are like a mirror for me. And so for them to say one thing and do another, and, it's a reminder for me that I have to be better, because I'm flawed. I'm human like anybody else. I make mistakes. And so I can't ask them to do anything that I'm not doing myself. So for me, having kids who will be consistent in who they are, and again, it's something that we all are a work in progress in, it's important for them to understand the importance of trying to do things the right way, and being the best that they can every single day. Now, that best might look different. 100% may look different on Tuesday than it does on Wednesday, but are they giving their all? And again, I can't ask them to do it if I'm not. And so for me, body language is a big, big thing. So rolling your eyes, sucking your teeth, palms up, all that stuff are signs. And again, they're things I have to get better at. And so for me to have the high expectations, I can't tell them one thing and do another, because kids are smart. We've all sat in classrooms where we know when the teachers don't know their stuff or whatever, kids know. Kids know. So, again, it's a reminder for me to try to be my best self every day. And again, some days are better than others, but I'm going to push them. They're going to push me, and we're going to all make each other better.
What sorts of methods do you use outside of your own accountability for the players? Do you hold them to being self-accountable?
There's a few that and it may rotate, but I'll check in with them, what's going on in your class. Or, because I'm on campus all day, I teach, I'll run into teachers and they'll tell me so-and-so was acting up today or so-and-so didn't turn in, whatever. And so I'll ask them. And the smart ones, they'll figure out if I'm asking, I already know the answer. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like being a parent. And I tell myself, if I'm asking you, I probably already know the answer, so you probably should tell me the truth. And the new kids will lie. They'll try to get over it. They'll think they're smarter than me, like we all did at some point.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, once they figure out that I try to do my homework before we have a conversation, then they'll know that they can be transparent. And, again, it's not if they fall short, it's when, because, again, we all do. But it's what are we going to do to help them get to meet the standard? And if they continuously are failing and not trying to meet the standard, then we got to have a different conversation. So the accountability could be a talk, it could be running, it could be not playing, it could be a suspension. It all depends on where we are on the spectrum. But, we all have a level of accountability. My AD or my principal are going to look to me to have whatever done or turned in, and, something that we all have to answer to somebody. And so if we're doing, and I got a personality where I don't like being fussed at. So because I don't want to get fussed at, I try to make sure my stuff is on point, right, so that, the conversations are fewer in between. So I try to get an idea of what's expected. And I tell my players to be proactive. In my class, we talk about the 7 habits with Stephen Covey. And habit number 1 is being proactive. And so being reactive means you're late. You ain't getting it done, and now you got to, do extra or turn in some late stuff or whatever. But if you're proactive, it's usually for the people who are more prepared and mature.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Can you talk more about your, how you get the most out of your players? I think one of the things that you just mentioned is you have them read a book. And I think it's the 7.
Yeah, so the 7 habits is something that we do in my class with the 7 habits of a highly effective team. Mm-hmm. And there are 7 habits that are life skills. And so for my classes, we use them.
What are the 7 habits?
Being proactive is number 1, beginning with the end in mind, putting first things first, think win-win, seek first to understand, then to be understood, synergize, and sharpen the saw. The book that we read, I got from Coach Knipe at Long Beach State. They've won multiple national championships for the men's volleyball. Men's volleyball. And so it is a book that he had his team read, and they go through the 5 dysfunctions. And so I didn't have them read the book, but we talked about it. I gave them some excerpts from it, and I gave each 2 or 3 kids in a group, and I gave them a dysfunction. And so one of them is the foundation of the pyramid is accountability. And so one of them is there's accountability, there's trust, there's lack of commitment, fear of conflict. So there's 5 of them. And so I gave each kid a dysfunction, and we talked about what is a team. So for example, fear of conflict, what does a team look like that fears conflict? And what does a team look like that has mastered, and is not afraid to confront each other? And how is it done? How are they confronting each other? And so we've talked about it. And so each group had to give a presentation on that dysfunction. And I feel like it was helpful for us. So it's something that I'll continue to do with my groups because, all those things are dysfunctions, and it can keep a team from being successful.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you talk more about how this past season went for you? And now, as season's kind of ending and you have seniors, I know that seniors can kind of look at you like, hey, are you going to get ready to start talking to schools for me, right, on my behalf? And, this is something even for me in my business personally that I can struggle with at times because a lot of times kids want you to vouch for them, right? They want you to speak well on their behalf. But not all the time do they come in prepared and ready to go.
Right.
And, there's this kind of space where, and a lot of times for me, I'm not going to lie on another kid's behalf. Right, because these are my relationships, right? And so exactly. And so can you talk more about that? Just how you manage that within the players that you work with, and also being a former head coach for college, and also being an assistant at Long Beach State. Like, talk more about the relationships that you have with coaches, how important they are, and also just that end of the spectrum in the sense of speaking on other players' behalf, vouching for them, essentially putting in a good word or a reference for them.
Well, because I've been doing it for a long time at a lot of different levels, I've built some really good relationships. And thankfully, we've had quite a few coaches that have come to our workouts, some at our games, some I've sent film to. And so the ones that have come to practice, I asked them to speak with our team. So they share, one, what they see, two, what they're looking for, and the things that are important for them. So now it's coming not from me, it's coming from someone who's already at that level. Yes, I've been at that level. I've played there, I've coached there, and I did both successfully. But they're hearing it from someone who's there currently, present day. And so when I'm talking to them about you dribbling too much or being on time or working hard or being able to run a play, those things are typically echoed. And so it's not just me talking, this is someone who's coaching currently at the Division I level saying, here are the things that are important and here's what we look for. Now, is everyone able to accomplish it and do those things? Not in most cases. It's super hard with the transfer portal now, with the rules that are coming out with community colleges, not having to use all their eligibility when they're there. It's damn near impossible for a high school kid to get a scholarship unless he's super special. But I have our coaches, not our coaches, but the coaches that have come from colleges, I have them speak, and I have the kids ask questions. Here's what you want to know. Ask them. So that way they can see. And usually, for better or worse, I'm honest with our guys. Here's where you are, or here's what you need to do to get better. And I want all of them to get better. But if they don't shoot it well or they don't handle it well, you can't do it at the expense or detriment of the team.
Sure.
We're trying to win, so I want you to get better, but not, where we lose and you handle the ball and you're not supposed to.
Right.
As an example. But, at the end of every year, I do meet with the seniors. I do exit interviews for all the guys. And so if they want to pursue it, I'll be honest with them, whether it's junior college or prep school or Division II, III. I've had probably 40 to 50 kids that have gotten scholarships that play for me. So I have a pretty good gauge of where they're going to be, where they're going to land. And depending on where they are, how bad they want it, if you really want to play, you might have to go JUCO. You might have to do a year in prep school. If you're really good, you may have a chance to play D2 or, maybe even D1. Right now I have kids that I've coached at Grand Canyon, at Oklahoma, at Dominican D2 school. So, I have a pretty good gauge. But if you did not really put in the time and commit, and I'm going to be honest, you were late these times, you didn't have your clothes these times, you didn't take care of business in the classroom, so it's probably not going to happen for you, at least right now. I'm not going to say it won't ever happen because you can mature and grow if you want to learn from this experience, but it's going to take some time and some diligence if you're serious. So, I do have the conversations. And again, I do have exit interviews at the end of the season, and I'm honest. And to your point, I tell them I'm not going to lie for you because if I lie and they sign you, they won't recruit another kid for me, and I'm not going to ruin the reputation of the program.
Has a kid ever told you in one of those exit interviews that they just weren't willing to go to a certain place because of a level?
Yeah, a lot of kids aren't realistic about the level that they're at, or they don't understand how competitive D2 is or D3. You know, it's a really, really competitive level. I coached at Dominguez Hills, and there were a lot of Division I bounce backs. We coached some, we played against some. And Division II basketball and Division III basketball is super competitive. They just don't understand because they've never experienced it. You know, even JUCO ball, you're playing against kids that might be in their mid-20s, you know, grown men who have full-time jobs, and so they're going to knock your ass around, and, you know, you just don't. You come in there as an 18-year-old high school kid, you got no clue. So it's just an ignorance of not understanding or being aware of how competitive basketball is at the next level. And I get it. Everyone has a dream, right? And I don't want to be the dream killer, but if you're asking me, then I'm going to be honest. For sure.
Yeah, it's funny. After college, I went to College of the Canyons. And, at the JUCO level, anybody can try out for the team.
Right.
And so we had somebody on my team that was like 35 years old.
It happens.
And it was just, it was a challenge for me in a lot of ways because I was this 18-year-old, really small kid.
She probably looking at you like you a little... Get your little ass out of here.
Yeah, and also just like strength-wise, life experience-wise, like we were just on, two way different, parts of our life. Right. And so I think that was a challenge in itself too, just, at that JUCO level, getting along with people that are on your team that are so different than you, there's this huge age gap. Everybody is kind of in a different part of their life. And
socioeconomic status.
Right. Right. Yeah, can you talk more about that? Because you've been at Mount SAC as well.
Mount SAC, I was at Fullerton College, I was at Compton College. So I did 7 years as a head coach at 3 different places. Won conference championships at all 3. Went to the state championship at Fullerton. I went to the Elite 8 at Compton. So we had some coached some really good players. A lot of kids got scholarships. We won a lot of games. So for me, those experiences, because JUCO, and I would tell them, like, this is your last chance. You do understand that, right? Like, you're coming in late, you're not working hard, you're not playing well. This is it. And so one day, for one of my teams, I went and got, like, job applications for Target and Costco and Taco Bell. I'm like, what is this for? I'm like, because you didn't get it in high school. You didn't get it in prep school. And the way you're going now, this is where you're going to be. Because you're not going to school, you're not going to class, you're not going to get a scholarship. So for young black men, you ain't getting no real job. This is going to be what you're going to be doing for real life. And so it kind of was a wake-up call. Because I'm like, well, how do you see this playing out? You're not going to graduate here with your AA, and you're not playing well. What's next? And they don't always think like that. Like, what is going to happen if this doesn't work out? Like, you've been to 2 places at 2 levels, and you didn't get what you wanted. So this is it. Like, there's no more chances after this. So you're not really committed to making this thing work. This is what your future looks like. Because young black Americans without an education, probably not going to do a whole lot. So, it was a wake-up call for some. Some didn't get it. And I learned early on that you can't save everybody. And some people will figure it out later on in life, hopefully. But some of them don't figure it out in their 20, 21, 22 years of age.
Yeah, I think for me going the JUCO route, I initially went JUCO route out of high school because I had 3 major knee surgeries, and I really wanted to rehab my body and feel good, going to the next step in my journey. And it was a huge wake-up call because, I wasn't living with my parents, and I was first time on my own, first time I got to make my own decisions about, am I going to show up to class? What time am I going to get to school for practice? Right. Am I going to take the initiative to take care of my body? All of those things seem to all happen at once. And, looking back as a 20-year-old or 18-year-old really at the time, it's hard to understand the sacrifices that are needed to be successful. We hear that a lot of you have to sacrifice. But as an 18-year-old, we don't quite understand what that means and what that looks like.
Right.
And
was there anyone coaching you or guiding you through the process?
I had these 2, older coaches, and, they were probably within the last, 5 to 10 years of their career, and they had a lot of success with the things that they had been doing there for a long time. And I say this because it was a great experience for me as far as basketball. I had great success.
Right.
But I think that in some ways, I needed maybe a closer mentor, somebody that was more active in the day in, day out of
the day-to-day habits.
Right, of what my days looked like, what I was doing.
Right.
And I think that there would have been value to that. Now, I'm not saying I didn't get a good experience, but I think
it would have gone better.
Yeah, and I think I would have taken away or learned more from that.
For sure.
If I had somebody that was, I don't need you to micromanage, but check in on my day, right? Like when I went
check me when I'm out of pocket.
Right. When I went to a 4-year, my coach would come and peep her head in the classroom to see where I was sitting in the classroom, right? Was I on the front row?
Right.
Was I all the way in the back? Was I on my phone? Did I have my headphone in? And like that stuff was good because, I was always a smart kid. I got through school and I did well, but I didn't push myself academically until I got to my master's program.
Right.
But having somebody that was on top of me, that I knew cared about me, I tried a lot harder.
Makes a difference.
For sure. But I think the thing that's important to take from this is like sacrifice, right? Sacrifice is something that we have to decide on in every aspect of our life, at every point in our life. How can we as coaches do a better job helping our players understand what sacrifice looks like, even if their development, isn't exactly where ours is at that point in time, and they can't understand it to that level and that extent.
That's a great point for me because I'm stubborn and hard-headed and was a lot worse when I was younger. For me, it took for me to fail. And it wasn't until I wanted something and didn't get it or didn't accomplish something or fell short that I learned, okay, if I don't want this again, then I have to sacrifice or, study more or get up earlier or go to bed later or whatever it is. For me, the experiences teach me more than someone just trying to tell me because I'm hard-headed. I have to see for myself. So when I come across players, like you mentioned London earlier, he's a see-for-yourself kind of player. And so, he rides to school with me to and from every day. And so we have conversations about, if you don't start listening, you're going to put your own foot in your own ass,
right.
And so he has seen it on some instances. And so he just kind of shared with me, even just yesterday, I saw him at a workout and he was like, man, you tell me to be a good person. This little kid, I didn't know his house. We had the LA fires and I didn't know that he had been in the fires, and his dad told me just by me talking to him a little bit, a couple times a day has made a difference for him. And he was like, man, just being a good person impacts people. I'm like, oh, really? Where'd you hear that? And he just dropped his head and smiled. And so, the stuff that I did, it's funny because it comes back, the kind of player I was or being hard-headed or whatever, for whatever reason, God has given me kids that have had tough paths or tough past. And so it's not always about winning. And you mentioned it earlier, I'm grateful for the success I've had, but the impact that I've been able to have with a lot of young men has been the biggest blessing for me.
Is there a moment that stands out to you as you were coaching that's kind of changed your perspective in some way?
Changed it in what way?
Anyway, changed it in a way where maybe it reaffirmed that you were on the right path, or maybe it was a perspective shift of some sort.
Getting kids that are higher character, not perfect, but higher character matters. Early in my career, and even still now to some degree, I have kids with troubled pasts. And so coaching kids who have a higher level of resilience and character and a stronger desire to do the right thing, it helps with success because I learned early on that in order to have success at a higher level, to compete for championships and win conference championships and win in the playoffs and that kind of stuff, you're going to have to overcome something. So you have to overcome a level of adversity. And so the immature kids, when things get tough, they'll tap out. They'll blame people. They'll finger point. or won't show or miss or whatever. And so for me, you talked about the integrity piece, and for me, the kids who are committed and are serious give you a better opportunity to win. And so that is being reaffirmed at every level. Just having kids who are committed to whatever the process is and whatever the goals are matters, because the ones who aren't, it's a team sport. So when someone has bad body language or a bad attitude, or even just like me, if I have a bad day and I go home, well, who's going to be affected by it? The people in my household, So for me, understanding that team sports is the same way, trying to bring in good people matters, because in order to win a championship or compete for a championship, you have to have people who can overcome adversity. And so if they're fragile or fall apart when the adversity hits, it's hard to succeed and overcome.
Yeah, I love that. I've been asked before, like, what's your niche within this industry as far as player development? Like, what players do you work with? And for me, I think it's so interesting because I've always sought out the high character individuals, and that's also been something that has just naturally kind of gravitated towards me. And I think there's so much to be said about that,
right,
as a coach. And something that is really important for me, for my players that I teach them, is whenever we walk into the gym, we say hello to everybody in the gym, right?
Something that we had to implement.
Right. We make ourselves, exactly. We make ourselves known. We make other
guests speak to people.
Exactly. We make other people feel comfortable.
Right.
And I think that speaks to the high character piece.
Mm-hmm.
And for you, you've been on both sides, right? You've been on the high school side where you have helped players go somewhere. Mm-hmm. And you've been on the college side where you've been recruiting players.
Right.
What other sorts of things are you looking at as a coach that's recruiting to bring in players to your culture? What other sorts of high quality or high character things are you looking for in individuals, and how can you tell those things?
How you are on the bench when you're not in the game. If a player on your team falls down, do you run over to pick them up? When you're not playing well, what's your body language like when you don't get calls? Because everyone's fine when things are going well. Just in any relationship, I don't know if I can trust you until I have to, until things get tough, right? So, in a game, there's going to be moments where there's adversity. So when you don't get a call, coach takes you out, you get a foul call, turn or whatever, how did you respond? And so those are the things that I look for, and how tough you are. If you play hard, you're going to have a chance to win. Now, you might have to make some plays and make a basket or execute something, but playing hard will always give you a chance. So for me, soft doesn't work. Toughness will always matter for me, just because, in order to have success, you have to be competitive. And to me, there's a difference. Competing is a different level than playing hard. Most people play hard, but are you doing everything you can to win? So it's like doing a running drill. Are you trying to make the time, or are you trying to get your best time? Those are two different things. Some people that can make the time will jog and cruise and finish right before the horn sounds. The people who are competitive are going to run their ass off every single time.
Has there ever been a time where you've recruited a player, right? You really liked his game.
Mm-hmm.
He either came on an official visit, to a school you were at, or you met him outside of him playing, and you realized that this kid is either not going to be a good fit,
Absolutely.
or maybe the character is not up to par with the culture that you guys are creating.
Yep.
And what sorts of conversations do you have with players at that point in time?
I just try to be honest, and you're not going to play here if this is what you're doing. If you're not going to play hard, if you're not going to come on time. And some kids I've removed, some kids I've dismissed, some kids. And here's the trick, right? Obviously, we're all imperfect, myself included. I have to decide, does the kid have some challenges, or is he just someone that it's not going to work, or not willing to change or grow? Because we're all here to help people grow. It's part of my job is not just to help people win, but to help them be better, right? So does the kid have a flaw or two and is willing to work through it? or is he comfortable in the dysfunction? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so for me, being able to decipher the difference between the two matters. And have I gotten it right every time? No, of course not. I've been wrong a couple times, and I'll tell him, like, look, man, I'll hold your hand. We'll figure this thing out, but I'm not going to drag you. So if you are just content with where you are, probably going to stay there, because I can't have the success of the team being dragged down because someone's not on board. So the teams where we've had that minimized have been the teams where we've had more success. The teams where we've had multiple guys drag it down the success has been lower. So I have to do, my due diligence, and a lot of it is prayer, asking God, because there's things that I can't see. I don't know, who is a good fit. Because you can be a good player but not a good fit, and you could be a kid who is less than perfect, but someone who really wants to do well and grow and change, like we all should be doing, and they could be a good fit. But, I'll take a kid who's not as talented but will cheer on the bench and be excited and bust his ass and play hard. I'll take that over a kid who's talented but, selfish or negative, or, when we watch film, because we watch it every day, I'll click on guys who everybody's standing up cheering and one guy's just sitting down. I'll draw a little arrow like, look at you. What is this? And I'll ask them in front of the team. So
I think that's been something that's been really cool about watching your team this year, is that they genuinely all root for each other. They all...
Depends on the day.
For the most part.
We try. And to your point, we talk about it.
Right.
Like, I'm on the bench and you're playing. If I'm over here sitting here moping and pouting, and then you go in, and when I go in, you're going to cheer for me. You have to be able to give what you want. And so you can't ask for anything that you're not willing to give, because then there's no balance.
Sure. So, I think the biggest thing is you can see it's an intentional thought from the players. It's an intentional intentional conversation that you have with them.
Yeah. Some of it's not authentic.
But it comes... No, intentional, not authentic, right, intentional. Right. But you can tell. Yeah. When I've gone to your games, right, players are, after they're done having their pout session about coming out, they're standing up and they're right, cheering. And I think that's important. And something I want to transition to off of something that you said was this concept of just growth and adapting. In which ways, I know that you're a very defensive-minded coach. Mm-hmm. In which ways have you seen the game develop and change? And what misconceptions or narratives do you feel like is currently happening within the game that you think could help improve if we kind of switched it up a little bit?
Well, obviously the Warriors and Steph have changed the narrative with everyone wanting to shoot jump shots.
Sure.
And so I think that works if you have great shooting. It's not always the case, but a lot of people want to do it, and it's how a lot of people play. And I think you hear the conversations about the NBA now. Viewership is down, and, the complaint is people are just jacking up threes. There's not a lot of ball movement. People aren't always playing hard. And so for me, if you are... I try to allow people to play to their strengths. That's important for me. So if you can shoot it great, you get more freedom and more rope. If you don't, then, again, I don't want to kill your confidence, but we're trying to win. And if it's not something that you do well, then do what you do to help the team. Right. And I'm not saying don't ever shoot it or whatever, but just let's be mindful of keep the main thing the main thing. And, we'll get in shop to get up shots, and if it's not something you do, we can work on it or whatever it might be. But the trend of everyone just jacking up threes is something that I can't get with. There's a lack of post play and, just people throwing the ball inside. For me, that's something that we have a big kid on our team. We try to work on it. He's young, but he's growing and developing. So for me, we just want to continue to get better. And, I try to cater what we do according to the strengths of the team, whatever that is. So if we have 5 guards, we'll play faster, we'll press, we'll trap. If we have a bunch of bigs, then we'll go high-low and throw the ball inside. And, so I try to make sure that we're playing to our strengths, whatever that is. And it may fluctuate each year based on personnel. So the trend of threes, it's great if you have them. But, we were taking a lot of threes early on and just it wasn't good for our team. We were shooting, and even we had a couple games this year where we were like 1 for 15 or 2 for 16, and it's just the makeup of our team. So, being self-aware is important, especially if you want to get recruited. I tell our guys, you don't want to advertise what you can't do.
Right. And outside of the wins and losses, how are you measuring success within your team?
Are we getting better? We lost to
Do you have certain markers or things that you chart or things of that nature?
We do. We watch film. We stat every game. Huddle breaks down our stats. So we'll talk about our field goal percentage or our turnovers or our missed box outs or whatever. But I've been doing this long enough where I can gauge. So we lost to St. Anthony, and we had a kid not play. We ended up losing by 3 or 4 points on the road at St. Anthony. And I told our guys after the game, I'm like, guys, we're getting better. We're close. We're making progress. And so for us at this level, when I got the job, we were Division IV. And somewhere midway through the season, we were in the top 30 for CIF. So that, technically makes us a Division I team. And I could see the growth. And I would tell them, I'm honest, to a fault sometimes, that I could see progress and growth, and even in the loss. So it didn't show on the scoreboard, but I could see them getting better in terms of buying into what we were doing. And right after that, we went on a 4-game winning streak. We beat a couple teams on the road that were highly ranked. And we could just see the progress.
Yeah, I think that's huge, just development in general. I think, obviously, that's my job. That's what I do on a daily basis. And so, there's certain things for certain players that I'm measuring.
What are you measuring?
It depends on the player, right? If it's somebody that's coming in that's a really good shooter, I'm measuring how many shots we're making. We're shooting a lot of shots that are game-like shots. So, if it's corner threes or maybe it's pump fake escape dribbles or, maybe their team runs pin downs for them, we're calculating how many shots they make. And we want to have, a consistent number. My goal for my elite players is let's be 70% and above, right, especially if there's nobody on us.
Should be able to make 7 out of 10.
Right. And I think that also can keep players engaged. Right? We're not just doing things just to do them, right? We're doing things to work. Exactly. And I think that's the biggest part of development. A lot of times we want the wins. We want to see, for me, I want to see them do well on the court. I want to see them apply the things that we're working on. Right. But sometimes it's the other small things that you have to highlight and pay more attention to. So I think there's a lot of value in that.
Absolutely. 100%.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me, Coach.
Of course. I got a couple of things that I want to kind of end with. Okay. Since I know that you're a big defensive-minded coach, I want you to give me your top 5, your starting 5, all defensive guys.
Damn. You're going to have some people mad at me. All defense. So there was
Could be all time.
All time?
Yep, could be all time. Any generation.
There was a guy who played for me at Compton College and at Fullerton College. His name's Wayne Andrews. He went to Centennial High School in Compton. He played for Rod Palmer, who's now a UCLA assistant coach.
You can also name NBA dudes too.
Okay.
Could be all-time NBA or players that you've coached.
There's another one. Damn. Jaden Bush, one of the best defensive guards who played for me at St. Anthony as a freshman at Dominican University, was in Defensive Player of the Week multiple times. He just was, and we pressed and trapped, but he would get mad at me when I pressed because he was like, I want to guard it by myself. And so I loved it every time he said it. Didn't always listen to him, but he wanted to do it just on his own. So that would be another one. Elijah Price, who's now at Fresno State, 6'9" kid. I never worried about switching a ball screen because he could guard a guard and keep guys in front of him. Who else? Darian McKinstry, who played for me at Fullerton College. He signed with the University of New Orleans. We were, I think, 28-6, and went to the state championship game in JUCO. Another one would be Antonio Bigelow, who played for me at Mount Sac and signed with Montana State. He was really, really good at ball pressure. Damn, you put me on the spot. You said only 5. That's 5, but there's more for sure.
Yeah. I figured you'd have a lot of people on that list.
Yeah, I mean, the really good teams that I had, they enjoyed it, and they enjoyed shutting down people, which is rare because when anybody goes to a court, they don't do defensive slides or box out drills. They just get up shots or dribble, right? So, they're my best teams. They really enjoyed locking people up, and so it makes it fun because everybody wants to score, and so when they can't, and we know that they can't, it's like a dominant thing.
I think it's always special when you have kids that say, I got him.
Right. Or can I guard the best player? It excites me whenever I hear it.
Yeah.
And you only get a few of those kind of guys.
And you can't teach that competitive spirit that want to just stop somebody.
No, it's either it's in you or it's not.
Right.
For sure.
Right. I love that. And last thing, now it's your turn. You can ask me any question that you would like.
Dang.
I know I've been asking you all the questions.
Fine. I've actually hit you with a couple too. You've got some great answers.
You did.
You said this is your first podcast.
It's my first podcast.
How do you feel about it?
I feel like there's some pros, some cons. I think there's things that I've done well, things that I could improve on. But I think overall I've kind of eased my way into it, and I feel pretty good about it.
You should feel great about it.
Thank you.
You're pretty awesome.
Thank you so much.
One more question would be, do you want to coach at some point, or do you want to continue to just train?
That's the magic question. I think for me, coaching is something like I'm so passionate about. I love being a part of a team. I can remember being a player and just like how many special memories and moments that I had on teams that I was on. Bus rides, dinners, pre-game stuff, like all of that stuff is so meaningful to me. Mm-hmm. I think the hard part, or the thing that, I contemplate a lot is, where is my impact the greatest? And
where do you think that is?
I'm still deciding. I'm not sure. I would never turn down and say, like, I would never coach again.
If I asked your kids that you've worked with as coach and as trainer, where would they say your impact is the greatest?
Coaching.
But you're not sure if you want to do it.
I think there's a lot of ways to coach. I think that you can coach a team in a lot of different ways without it necessarily being on the court. And so I think for me, I'm trying to figure out exactly what way that looks like for me. Whether it's creating things behind the scenes with a team for players, for the future, whether that's, being a part of a staff, whether it's applying for another head coaching position somewhere. I'm not sure, but I know that my passion is within basketball. I know that the impact that I feel coaching is by far, I cannot compare it to anything that I've ever done. So I think that door is still open and would still, I think, always be open no matter what I was doing. But I like that question.
You should pursue it.
I appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you. What advice would you give to kids or hoopers that are playing now?
Kind of what you talked about earlier, sacrifice. Being willing to put in extra time, being coachable. I would say the biggest thing is getting out of your comfort zone, because most kids don't understand. And parents, unless they played it or coached it, don't understand. And a lot of parents love their kids, but maybe don't fully understand how it works. And so while I understand that they love little Johnny and want him to be great, they may not understand the process of it. So being willing to be uncomfortable, whether it be extra hours or being coachable or working on your weaknesses or whatever it might be, being willing to make those sacrifices of getting out of your comfort zone.
Nice. Yeah. And can you talk about how parents can best support players? I think this is a huge one.
Find a coach that you trust and let them coach your son or daughter. Because as you mentioned earlier, failure is part of it. So there's going to be games where they sit, where they don't play well, where they have bad games. And because of the relationships that I built that we talked about with the players, I constantly hear from the kids, the car ride home sucks. You know, my mom is driving me crazy or my dad won't listen. Some of my better players have even stopped talking to their parents for a while. And again, I don't fault mom or dad. They're just loving their kid and they're doing the best that they know how to do. But, you know, and I'll tell our parents this at our parent meeting, if you don't trust me, don't send your kid here. Because they're gonna be held accountable. They're gonna be pushed. There are gonna be some significant demands of time and accountability. And so if you don't think that I'm gonna do a good job, don't send them here. Because we're inherently at opposite ends. You want your kid to do well, and I want your kid to do well too, but not more than I want the team to do well. So even if your kid may be a starter, if he's not getting it done that night, unless he's just like extremely high level, then we got to give somebody else an opportunity. And so the parent doesn't want to see that. And, you know, for the parent, it's rarely enough. So if my kid's on JV, I want him on varsity. If he's on varsity, I want him to be part of the rotation. If he's part of the rotation, then I want him to start. If he's starting, I want him to play the point, and I want him to get shots up. So it never ends.
Right.
And so, again, most parents don't understand. And again, I explain we're at opposite sides of the spectrum because I want the team to do well, and you want your kid to do well. And so for a lot of parents, the kid comes before the team, but not for me. And so again, you know, when your kid is struggling, you may have to come and regroup, or if somebody comes in and does better, you know, do I go back to your kid just to go back to your kid? But if someone's outperforming them, then we're trying to win. So finding someone you trust, and then let them coach your kid. Otherwise, you're going to be intervening. You're going to do the same thing when they get to college. You're going to call the college coach. You want a meeting with them, or you're going to be screaming at the games. It's just, you know, understanding how the dynamic works. And what I've explained to our parents at our meetings and kids is, you know, when you're at the games and you're acting up, if coaches are there, they're not going to recruit your kid because you're going to do the same thing to them. So just the lack of understanding is probably, it's a huge thing for parents. But again, I get it. They love little Johnny, and they want little Johnny to do well. So
Yep.
It's part of it.
Yep.
You know, so it's like being a leader or a manager at any business. You're going to have people who aren't happy with you. So, you know, just the experience of it, you know, hopefully will teach us all.
Yeah. Thank you guys for tuning in to the first episode of Timeout with Sko. Thank you for joining me today, Coach Cap, and I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one.